I'm not sure I could add to what Father has just described. Uh, in fact, I've contemplated hiring him as my publicist uh, in future ventures. Uh, I have some written comments. The good news is they're not very long, which usually thrills the undergraduates. Um, I had to suffer through a speech by Bill Clinton that went on for 90 minutes. Uh, I'm not Bill Clinton. Uh, if prepared speeches were going to save us, I believe we would have arrived at the promised land some time ago. Uh, I'm honored to be here. I'd like to say good morning to the trustees and students at St. Vincent's College. I am, as you've already discovered, Bill Strikland, and I'm very honored to have been selected to give your commencement address this morning. I am executive chairman and founder of Manchester Bidwell Corporation, a center for arts and vocational education founded in 1968 during the race riots of that year. My community was quite literally in flames. There was substantial violence both nationally and locally, particularly experienced in my community of Pittsburgh during this period. I believe my calling was turned out to be an effort to try and contribute to making a difference in the lives of people viewed as liabilities rather than assets in their community. The center that I took over during that period experienced significant tax challenges. In other words, my predecessor had taken all the withholding money and left the students for dead. I decided that was not going to be the end of the story. So I was able to convince several private and corporate foundations to contribute financially to its reconstruction, and therefore provided the opportunity to become a successful center for today. Today, that center is thriving, teaching vocational and arts education with an 85% graduation rate and an 80% successful job placement rate for people who were given up as dead. In the old days, we were a building trades program. We teach carpentry and bricklaying and so forth. And a fellow named John Hines showed up. He did pretty good in the ketchup business. And he came to see me. And he said, I understand that you're training people for the building trades. And I said, yes, sir, I am. He said, well, why don't you train some people for the food industry? I said, well, I'm in the building trades. I don't know anything about food. He said, well, what would your answer be if I said I'd give you $1 million? I said, Senator, it appears that we're going into the food training business. and John did give him $1 million, and he loaned me the head of research for the Heinz Ketchup Company. And for the last 25 years, we have a 90% placement rate for people in the culinary industry, thanks to Senator Hines. These days, we do medical records and medical assistance training. The net training cost of working with this population is less than $25,000 per year. The graduates repay the initial cost of training, free to them. Within 36 months, their taxable employment earnings pay off the cost of incarceration, for example, in Pennsylvania. You know what it costs in Pennsylvania to keep people locked up? $40,000 a year. For 19, I have them working and they pay back the investment in 36 months. I met the professor who teaches business, and professor, that's called return on investment, ROI. There is nothing wrong with people that affection and good food can't cure. We are at the point of demonstrating that it is more cost effective to provide a quality vocational education experience as to the cost of locking people up in prison. That's not working. This is working. At this point, I would like to give a shout out to a man who has become my hero. His name is Jeff Mallory, no stranger to this school. His life best represents what I believe in: persistence, determination, pride. He shared with me over the years his extraordinary ability to insist on hope when there wasn't any. And if there was one man who symbolizes the spirit of this place, it's Jeff Mallory. He has become a leader in St. Vincent's community and of the region. It is because of his life that I actually agreed to do this presentation. I would also like to acknowledge the Benedictine Order because, in my view, their work at St. Vincent's College and the value proposition directly affected my commitment to economic justice and racial equality. The spirit and commitment of these priests and monks at St. Vincent's illustrates a set of guiding principles in terms of how they manage their personal and professional commitment to excellence. When I was a high school student, and I actually was, more remarkably, I graduated from high school. As Father mentioned, I got into the University of Pittsburgh on probation because they had something called the Scholastic Aptitude Test, and they put this test in front of me, and it might have well have been in Greek. It was multiple choice, as I recall back then, so I kind of marked the thing up, flunked the test. But they sent me an application and said, we're going to let you in this place on probation, academic probation. Well, the better news is I graduated from the place. They made me an emeritus trustee, and I was the commencement speaker, as I am today. And the speech was, don't give up on the poor kids, they might end up being the commencement speaker. The project that I was working on was mentored and sustained by the priests of this place. I spent a day at the monk's residence and was invited to attend Vespers at the chapel that evening. I discovered the architect Tasso Katselas, who built the residence for the monks, as I recall, and what fascinated me was the architect and his sense for life and compassion and light, L-I-G-H-T. So I found out later he'd built a very famous house called Falling Water. So here's Mr. Ross, he's got these black kids in his van, and you get down through the woods, and there's this creek sitting right up on the top of this boulder, and the creek's running right through the house. And I said, in my neighborhood, we spend time trying to keep the water out of the house. This guy's got a creek running right down through the middle of the place. That's an interesting way of looking at water. But the other thing that fascinated me was the quality of the light that enveloped that house. And I said, if I can get that light into my neighborhood, I'm halfway home. So Pittsburgh Airport my center was the scale model for the Pittsburgh Airport. So it's become iconic. And because of the monks who captured my heart, I think I had what they call a religious moment. I was so overcome with the affection of these priests who welcomed in an African-American kid with a camera he borrowed from the pawn shop. But their music and their spirit literally transformed my life. I would like to suggest to each of you that you recognize these monks for their faith and the way in which they have conducted their lives. My plan is to continue to represent the spirit of this school in my work for as many years that God has given me. This speech is not for entertainment. I came here to recruit you. And what I mean by that is, those of you who are specializing in education and psychology, the world needs what you have now been trained to do big time. We're suffering in our country. Too much anger, too much hate. It has to stop. And so I am suggesting that we need your skills and we need your heart. I was offered a very prestigious award called, as Father mentioned, the MacArthur Genius Award, because I had discovered the cure for cancer of the human spirit. That discovery is called hope and light. I believe that that experience at St. Vincent's literally changed the trajectory of my life, particularly because it applied to the way in which I saw spirit. I saw that spirit this morning. I revisited it again in the lobby of St. Vincent's with the board and the members of the faculty and the priests who once again welcomed me with that same spirit and determination. You converted me again. My plan is to build centers like the one in Pittsburgh, and we have now established 10 centers, 6 of which are in Pennsylvania, and communities like Erie, Sharon, Brockway. And here in Westmoreland County, we just opened one called the Laurel Valley Center for Arts and Technology. We have centers now in Buffalo, New York, Chicago, Illinois, Grand Rapids, Michigan, New Haven, Connecticut, Boston, Massachusetts, and internationally, I built a center in northern Israel for the Jews and the Arabs, and it's still thriving today. Puerto Rico is open, and I just came back from Belfast, Ireland, where we are beginning the early work of building a center there for Protestants and Catholics. If I can pull this off in Israel for the Jews and the Catholics in Israel and the Christians, the Irish have no excuse. These centers are an expression of commitment to the Brothers of St. Vincent's, to their faith. My plan is to continue to represent that spirit in the work that I do, and I would like to say to you, you the graduates, that I hope that your spirit and what I feel in this room today will transform the way in which people see themselves in the world. Your families are a great legacy because none of you got here by yourself. There were people in your families who believed in you, sometimes when you didn't believe in yourself. And so I would like to thank all of you, the families, for guiding your children to a life of hope and possibility. That did not come by accident. That came because you believe in your children. And if we can get our country believing in its children again, I think we're on our way. Now, I would like to close this very brief presentation by a confession. I'm a survivor of a double lung transplant. I was pretty sick, and I received the gift of 2 new lungs 7 years ago. The doc, who was the principal lead in my surgery, said, "I'm a physician, so you can take this for what it's worth. I did not save you. God saved you." I saw light in that operating room as sure as I'm standing here listening and seeing you today. I was honored to be able to restore you to health. I believe that that light experienced in that chapel in 1965 was present in that operating room and guided that physician to bring me back into the world. And as Father mentioned, I did meet His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. And I told him my story. And His Holiness said, "You were kept here for a reason. And I believe your spirit, joined with my spirit, may be what the world needs to see a lot more of." So he blessed a prayer cloth for me and put it around my neck. His words and my words are now installed in the Benedictine chapel in Wadzel, Austria. So here's this African American kid who's now hanging out with the Dalai Lama, flying jets for a living, and reminding all of you, you should celebrate these priests. These men who affected me so deeply, I believe what they are sacrificing their life for is what may bring our country back to health. These monks get it. And not only do they get it, they're prepared to spend their life in the elevation of something they call faith. It's easy for me to talk about faith. It's a lot different if you believe in faith 7 days of the week for the rest of your lives. To me, that is called heroicism. And I am convinced that had it not been for that God moment that brought me to St. Vincent's back then and today, I wouldn't be giving this speech. You have to believe in yourselves. I believe in you, and I believe that your parents believe in you. And I have committed to making this a movement of the elevation of the human spirit and the Holy Spirit. And so on this very Pittsburgh day, there is light shining in this room. You know who it's from? Your eyes. Your eyes are glowing with the spirit that these monks were trained to provide. And I'm with you for this life and a part of the next one. And as Shimon Peres said to me, you have been blessed. So, Father, I would like you to pray for me, because I have been asked by God to not run away from trouble, but to run towards it. And so I will need your prayers and your affection and your love. And to the board and the trustees, God bless you for what you do. Thank you for allowing me to open up my heart on this Pittsburgh afternoon. Thank you very much.